The literal and slightly pompous approach of the royal parks to the Prince Albert Memorial demonstrates a failure in our administrative parts of the civil service to comprehend the nature and the scope of the Black Lives Matter protests and the ideal response. The ideal response is not to ditch statuary, but to contextualize it. And to contextualize statuary is not to provide sort of museum type references or what these QR codes. It's absurd. It's absurd. The Albert Memorial. What you need to do, or what the parks need to do, is to commission new memorials, new statues that reflect and comment on what is already there. The Albert Memorial. This is one of these striking examples, one of the great striking examples of the Gothic revival tradition. Stands in Kensington Gardens. It's designed by Sir George Gilbert Scott. It was unveiled in 1872 to honour Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's consort. And it's a grandiose monument featuring a variety of symbols and artistic elements. Prince Albert is depicted holding a catalogue of the 1851 Great Exhibition, which he had organised, and the structure is surmounted by a cross symbolising faith. And the frieze of Parnassus, a significant aspect of the memorial, has 169 individual figures representing artists, musicians, philosophers, showcasing this astonishingly devoted statesman whose interest was art and literature and music. It's the recent renovation in 1999 focused on the legacy, the grandeur, the elegance, the symbolism, the status, but also the incredible craftsmanship of this monument. And today, there's an article today in the Daily Telegraph, in the Sunday Telegraph, saying that this statue and the monument itself is now considered offensive because it reflects a Victorian view of the world that differs from mainstream views held today. Or at least that's what custodians say. And then it goes on to talk about the 176-foot Albert Memorial. Who cares about its height? Its height is far less significant. It's like judging Salisbury Cathedral by the height of its tower, by the height of its spire. And the only people who do that are Russian assassins. The glory of the Albert Memorial is about George Gilbert Scott, is about Albert himself, is about this celebration of culture. And yes, slightly patronising, slightly caricatured, and slightly out of date. And yes, it needs contextualising, but not with silly, pompous sort of descriptions on plaques or to be downloaded to your phone. That is not contextualising something. The Victorian era symbolism, which you find on old maps, utterly beautiful. Its portrayal of continents has, of course, come under scrutiny. The representations of Asia, America, Africa incorporate racial stereotypes now considered offensive. For example, Africa is represented by a woman on a camel and includes a white European woman reading to a black African man, a depiction rooted in colonial perspectives of European supremacy and so-called this civilizing mission. In the context of Black Lives Matter, which gained significant momentum in 2020, there has been an appropriately nationwide reassessment of public monuments in the UK. Many statues and memorials linked to slavery and colonialism have been scrutinised, with some being removed or so-called recontextualized, that simply means a plaque shoved on the bottom of it. That is not a recontextualization. That is a plaque on the bottom of a statue. When you go to the dentist, plaque is removed. Camden Council, for example, has implemented these QR codes on statues to provide historical context and highlight problematic views held by the figures depicted. That is not contextualizing. That is adding a QR code. We don't experience these statues by reading them. We walk around them. We walk past them. They are part of the architecture of our life. To contextualize them means to have other statuary in the vicinity. So we walk through this avenue of history and thought. There are steps that can be taken. The steps that are being taken at the moment are modest, slight, time-consuming, and frankly, and I come back to this word again, and I'm sure I'm going to be pilloried for it, bureaucratic. Words, 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 as Hamlet said, it's not what we need. Statues belong to this pictorial, this visual representation of the past, this visual celebration of the past, and therefore we need a visual response. Not something so abstract that we can't understand it, but certainly something which triggers a response. So educational plaques, QR codes that provide historical information. I wouldn't call this historical context. Yeah, fine. But it's only a first step, and it's a very modest first step, linking the statues to a broader historical context, the impact of colonialism, how views have evolved, maybe. But I think we need a more visual response. And I think it's time for something like the Prince Albert Memorial for the Royal Parks to commission another top-notch television program about their history, the restoration, and so on. Because the last film I think that was made was about 20 years ago. And in the light of Black Lives Matter, I think we could have a very interesting set of a sort of 4-part series investigating the statuary of London in the context of Black Lives Matter and setting forward a more dynamic artistic celebration that embraces our more diverse community and properly contextualizes these statues and public monuments. Engaging with the community, public consultation, especially those whose histories are represented, to decide the future of these monuments. These monuments should remain exactly where they are. Even the monuments of people who have been pilloried. There's no point in pulling down statues. We don't destroy our history to pander to the sensitivities of the present age. We contextualize our history and we celebrate the present age so that we can walk through our progress, so that we can see our progress. Augmented reality and virtual tours, absurd poppycock, really. The only way the only way that works is in a museum, and I think even there, augmented reality is a little bit silly. There is a wonderful site where you can walk into a room and you get a sort of 3D experience of walking through a Turner painting of the sea thrashing around, but the effect isn't that convincing or wet. And the much better option would be, for example, in the case of the Parthenon sculptures, to reproduce them and then colour them. So the originals can go back to Athens, and we can have a coloured variety of statues that represent what they would genuinely have been like. One of us, either in Athens or here, I think has a duty to show those statues in what we consider they would originally have been coloured in all their vibrancy. We can't colour the originals because that would be to destroy great works of art, but we could colour a very good reproduction, and good reproduction can be made, and it would solve a lot of problems. And there's certainly no point in two museums in the world having the same, or apparently the same statues. That's absurd. So there are ways forward in contextualising our public art, and it should be public. I also think that the charges made to the Athens Museum are appalling. It should be possible simply to go in, and we should be handing those statues back on condition that certainly access to the Parthenon frieze should be free, as it is in Britain. The commissioning contemporary artists, particularly from underrepresented communities, to create works that respond to or critique the existing monuments, a dialogue between the past and the present, that is absolutely essential. But we should be commissioning works which will last, not ephemeral work. So by all means, commissioning something which is based on graffiti, but it needs to be preserved in a formal way. So maybe transferred to tiling, or even in its own way, reconfigured as monumental sculpture. Historical exhibitions of artifacts, curating exhibitions to explore the history of these monuments, absolutely again. They're subjects to the impact of colonialism, and this is something, again, for television and for media. These exhibitions can serve as educational tools to help foster a more nuanced understanding of history. They should be packaged in such a way that the lessons from these statues, which children walk past every day, can be realized in school. These statues can be a guide, can be a help to history and to the teaching of history. And renovation and preservation needs to be undertaken with context, preserving the artistic and the historical value of these monuments, ensuring that any restoration efforts also include efforts to contextualize, clarify the historical and cultural significance now and then. And by taking these steps, London can maintain its rich historical landscape while acknowledging and addressing the problematic aspects of the past, creating a more inclusive and informed public space. And not just London, of course, Bristol, Birmingham, and the statues throughout our country, to Scotland, to Wales. There has been talk in Wales of removing statues of Wellington. This is nonsense. Removal should not even be an option. Addition, not removal. The statues from the Victorian period are a wonderful embellishment of our country, and are walking a physical history. And they are, I would say they're more important than the blue plaques that sort of pop up on people's houses. They're interesting, but you have to stop and look at them. Statues you don't stop and look at. You walk past them, just as you walk through great buildings, the great buildings of the past, and you walk around them, and they are part of your life experience. And that is the wonder of statues. We don't want to get into a position as in ancient Rome, where the heads of statues were replaced by the people who were currently in favour. We want to recognise that our past is important, and that our past has something to teach us. Maybe to teach us not to go there again, but to teach us. And to batter down the past is to hide our mistakes and our error. We need the mistakes and the error writ large so they aren't made again.